case history. Case history is usually divided into these headings. There is a basic patient information, there is dental history, medical history, history of habits, and the nutritional history. Then there is an extraoral examination, intraoral examination. You do your investigations. Based on the history, the examination, and the investigations, we reach to a diagnosis and a prognosis. And then we come to a treatment plan based on what is the best for the patient according to what is present in the patient's mouth. So all these basic dental history, all of you are quite familiar with. So I'll not go into all those things. Medical history is something which we don't know what exactly do we want to ask. Means the patient might start saying that no, there was some problem which I had some 5 years ago and I had a fever and then I was admitted in a hospital and this happened and that happened. Is that really important for our complete denture patient? So what is most important is history regarding potential medical emergencies. So any emergency that can happen during the treatment or just after the treatment because of any existing medical history. Then the history of medical illnesses which would have an effect on the denture supporting tissues, and the history of medical illnesses which would have an effect on the oral neuromuscular control. These things are most important for us. A lot of textbooks will give us a lot of medical illnesses to be asked for. I have written a few which are actually really very important, which are diabetes mellitus, which affects our denture supporting structure, osteoporosis, osteoarthritis, CVS might cause a potential medical emergency, neurological disorders and epilepsy would have effects on the oral neuromuscular control. So these are the things which we need to ask, and then we should know why are we asking it. Because then the examiner would ask, okay, if the patient has a osteoarthritis, what difference is it going to make? So we should be able to say that it is going to cause a problem in the denture supporting tissue. There might be a problem with the temporomandibular joint also. The patient might not be able to do regular jaw movements, because of which we might not be able to give the patient anatomic teeth. So we should know why we are asking and what we are asking. Then there is something which is examination of previous dentures, which we in our case history during the examination we tend to just forget. Either we say the patient is not wearing a previous denture and tell the patient, don't tell the examiner that you have a denture. That is what we tend to do. Don't do that. It is very simple actually. The examination of previous denture needs to be done in mainly these 5 points. The retention, that is the previous denture right now retentive or not? If it is not retentive, just write why do you think it is not retentive? Maybe because the tissues have changed, maybe because the previously made denture was short in some way, maybe because it is broken. Why is it not retentive? Similarly, stability. Check whether this existing denture, the vertical dimension of occlusion is correct or not, whether the patient is properly closing in the centric relation in the denture, and the aesthetics. The advantage of the vertical dimension and the centric relation is if it is accurate and the problem is only with the retention maybe, then you can use the vertical dimension of occlusion of this denture, centric relation of this denture, and it will be very easy for you during your jaw relation procedures. So that is why these 5 things are the most important that you need to ask for. Then let's come to extraoral examination. I am not speaking about the classification of the type of patients, the philosophical and indifferent. All of you know what it is. You know how to check for that. This temporomandibular joint, we don't know why are we checking for. It is given in our case histories. Please check for the temporomandibular joint. And then we palpate the temporomandibular joint. And we usually in our case histories write no abnormalities detected. So why do we want to check for temporomandibular joint? So usually we check for clicking or crepitus. These are the 2 things which we check for. And the third is whether the patient has any pain associated with clicking or crepitus. So if there is just clicking and that clicking has been going on since a long time and the patient does not have any pain, then we usually don't change our treatment plan and we go ahead and make the regular complete denture. But suppose the patient has clicking with pain, then we ask the patient whether this has started after the extraction of teeth or before the extraction of teeth. If it is after the extraction of teeth, there is a possibility that giving a denture is going to solve it because we are going to again establish the vertical dimension. But if it is there since a long time and the patient has had this pain and it is not resolved, then we need to first go in for all the other diagnostic procedures for a temporomandibular joint, evaluate, and then give a complete denture. So we should know why we are wanting to check for the temporomandibular joint. Then there is this space called as the retromylohyoid space, which most of us don't understand what to do with this retromylohyoid space. How do we evaluate the retromylohyoid space? So this retromylohyoid space, as you can see over here with this orange line, it lies at the distal end of the alveololingual sulcus. So this is the lingual aspect of the denture, and it lies at the distal end of the alveololingual sulcus. It is usually bounded medially by the anterior tonsillar pillar, that is from the inside. Posteriorly is the retromylohyoid curtain, which is formed by the superior constrictor muscle. Laterally there is the mandible and this is the pterygomandibular raphe, and anteriorly there is the lingual tuberosity of the mandible. Inferiorly there will be the mylohyoid muscle. So this space is the retromylohyoid space. So how do we evaluate for retromylohyoid space? What do we do? What we do is we place a mouth mirror in the patient's mouth till as low as we can place it without hurting the patient. Okay. Then we ask the patient to move the tongue to the opposite side. So we ask the patient to just touch the tongue to the cheek on the opposite side. When the patient is doing that, if the mouth mirror tends to displace too much, then that space is shallow. And if it does not displace much, then the space is not shallow, it is a deep space. That is the easiest way to check for this. So if it is deep, then it is a class 1. If it is shallow, or if the mouth mirror is displacing too much, then it is a class 3. Of course, this is a little subjective. You might feel it is a class 3, the examiner might feel it is a class 2, but that is okay. This is a subjective thing, but at least you should know how to check for it. Okay. Then frenum attachments. This is something which most of you don't check for. You just say, frenum present, buccal frenum present, labial frenum present. That is not how we want to check for the freni. We want you to nicely retract the lip or the cheek, nicely retract and see whether there is a single frenum or there are multiple freni. That is the first thing. Then whether the attachment of this frenum is towards the vestibule or towards the ridge. So if it is towards the vestibule or a maxillary, we call this as a low attachment. And if it is towards the ridge, it is a high attachment. Otherwise, if it is somewhere in the center, we call it as a medium attachment. That will help us in the determination of the prognosis, because if there is a high attachment of the frenum, then that is going to interfere with the movement. Whenever the patient does any movement, it is going to cause displacement of the denture. So these freni are very important, including the lingual frenum. So please check for these freni. You have to see how they are, how many they are, and how they are attached. Then mucosa, whether it is keratinized or not keratinized. So which part of the mucosa is usually keratinized and which part of the mucosa is usually not keratinized. This is something which you students are usually very confused with. Okay. So whenever there are teeth, somewhere over here, there is the attached gingiva. And this point is the mucogingival junction, below which the mucosa is not keratinized. Okay. So if you see on the edentulous picture, you will see that exactly on the crest of the ridge, there is tissue which is pale, which is slightly pale. And then from the point of the mucogingival junction, the tissue tends to become a little darker or a little redder, if you can call it that. Okay. So the area which is pale is the keratinized mucosa. You have to be able to identify whether your patient has sufficient keratinized mucosa or not. For example, this patient over here has sufficient keratinized mucosa. Whereas this patient, if you see, the amount of pale tissue is quite less than the mucogingival junction, and then you can see all this darker tissue. So here you can see that the keratinized mucosa is much less. If the keratinized mucosa is much less, there will be loss of support, reduced tolerance to occlusal loads. Automatically, the prognosis of the denture is not going to be as good. And you might have to do some changes in the impression technique. Okay, so you should be able to identify the keratinized mucosa and the non-keratinized mucosa clearly. Then the posterior palatal seal. We sometimes write class 1, we sometimes write class 2, we sometimes write class 3. So how do we determine what is a class 1, what is a class 2 and what is a class 3? Okay, so in a class 1, if you can see in this picture, you can see the soft palate is quite horizontal, at rest. this soft palate is horizontal at rest. What that means is, whenever the patient wants to speak, this soft palate is going to raise and it is going to close the space so that the patient can speak or swallow. Okay, so this palate is not going to have to move much to come in contact with the posterior throat form. Understood? Whereas in this, it is nearly vertical. So this will move quite a lot for it to contact this posterior throat form. Okay. So where the palate, soft palate, is not going to move much, there we can utilize more of the soft palate because that soft palate is not going to move. So the posterior palatal seal area in this region can be quite thick. Okay. Usually around 5 millimeters. For a class 3, this palate is going to move quite a lot. So if we have a very long posterior palatal seal area, there is going to be gap between the palate and the denture whenever the patient speaks. So here we are not going to be able to keep a very long posterior palatal seal area. It will be somewhere around 1 millimeter. That is a class 3. And anything between a class 1 and a class 3 is a class 2. Okay. So you have to look in the patient's mouth. You have to ask the patient to say ah. And if you see very vigorous movement when the patient says ah, that the palate is moving up vigorously when the patient is saying ah, it cannot be a class 1. It is usually a class 2 or a class 3. Okay. You people will be doing your patient preparation in which you would have made a final impression or you would have made a primary impression. Mark the posterior palatal seal in the patient's mouth, transfer it on your impression so that you know what is the width. Okay. If the width is around 5 millimeters or more, it's a class 1. If it is 1 millimeter, it's a class 3. Anything in between is a class 2. Speak scientifically when you are going to speak in the examination. Okay. Then we come to the interarch space and the relation of the maxillary and the mandibular arch with each other. So the ideal way of checking what is the interarch space and what is the relation of the maxillary and the mandibular arch with each other is by making a jaw relation. So ideally we are supposed to do a primary impression and then quickly make record basis and do a tentative jaw relation, mount it and check. But this is not possible for you during the examination. You don't have that much time. So what you can do is you can ask the patient to speak a little. Usually how we ask the patient to speak while recording the vertical dimension, use the words which end with the letter M like Ram or something. Once you train the patient and you know the patient's mandible is relaxed, just ask the patient to not move the mandible, retract and check the distance between the maxillary and the mandibular arch in the premolar region with a divider. Okay. And that will give you how much the interarch space or the interarch distance is. Okay. Plus, you will be able to see when you are checking with the divider whether both the points of the divider are in one line or you are having to check like this. If the maxillary arch is outside and the mandibular is inside, then it would be a class 2. If it becomes ulta, then it is a class 3. If they are straight, then it's a class 1. This is a very crude way of checking, but that is the only way of checking if you are not mounting. Okay. Then the next point that comes is, the next point is saliva. We don't know what to do with saliva. We usually write mixed kind of a saliva, but we don't see whether the amount of saliva which is there is sufficient, not sufficient. So whenever we want to first check for saliva, the first thing that we see is whether there is saliva or there is no saliva. If there is no saliva, there is xerostomia. So how do we find out there is no saliva is, you will see a patient with xerostomia having the tissues which are very shiny, with no layer of saliva on it, and they would be shining. Okay. So this is a patient who has xerostomia. So here don't write that the quantity of saliva is normal. The patient has xerostomia, The quantity of saliva is much lower. And the treatment plan changes drastically because of that. If there is saliva present and you want to check the amount of saliva, you just ask the patient to relax for some time or speak with the patient a little, and then without asking the patient to swallow, just retract and see whether saliva is getting pooled in the floor of the mouth. If there's a lot of saliva being pooled in the floor of the mouth, then the amount of saliva or the quantity saliva is slightly more. If there's a little saliva, then it is normal. Again, this is very crude because the way we check whether the amount of saliva is normal or not are not possible for you to do during the case history presentation. We have to take capillary measurements, or we have to take pipettes, or we have to ask the patient to drool the saliva. All these things are not possible during the case history. This is an easy way for you to do. What is more important is what is the quality of the saliva rather than the quantity. So we want to know whether the saliva is serous or mucus or mixed. And how do we come to know that? For that there is a test which is called as a thread test. So what we do is we take these two fingers, we dip these two fingers in the floor of the mouth, hold them like this and just slowly open. Okay. So this is the average distance. If the saliva opens till here and then it breaks, then it is mixed. If it starts breaking before that, then it is serous. And if I can make a very long thread without the saliva breaking, then it is mucus. Okay? This is again a little crude method, subjective, but at least you will be able to say that yes, this is the method which I know and this is how I have checked. And your examiner would feel happy. Then, if you are writing that you want OPGs or IOPAs to be done in investigations, ensure that on the day of the examination, these investigations are done. Don't just write orthopantomograph in investigation and then you have given your final diagnosis without checking the orthopantomograph. Okay. If you are writing in investigations that you want to get an OPG done, then ensure that on the day of the examination, you have got the OPG done of the patient. And then you should be able to tell the examiner what have you checked in the OPG. You have checked for the presence of any over-retained root pieces or any impacted third molars or any pathology because of the previous cysts, any over-retained or residual cysts, or you wanted to check the temporomandibular joint and everything is fine. You should be able to say what you wanted to check in the OPG or in the IOPA if you have advised any IOPA. This is something which I always feel the students tend to write. Something which I always feel the students tend to write not correctly. They write a case history for around 3 pages or 4 pages, and in the end they write the diagnosis as completely edentulous maxillary and mandibular arch. Obviously, it is completely edentulous maxillary and mandibular arch. You don't need to write a case history for it. We all know it is a completely edentulous maxillary and mandibular arch. Any layman will ask the patient to open the mouth and say, "हाँ, मुंह में दांत नहीं है." So that is not the diagnosis which we are expecting. We are expecting that you will write the positive findings from your case history in the diagnosis. For example, I have written one small diagnosis over here that after taking the complete case history, I have found that the patient is a philosophical patient with upper and lower ovoid arches. So I am writing philosophical, upper and lower ovoid arches in class 1 relation with well keratinized mucosa, favorable vestibules in the maxillary and less favorable in the mandibular arch, adequate interarch space and favorable frenal attachments. So from this I can see that most of the things for the patient are good. He is a philosophical patient, the arches are ovoid, they have good keratinized mucosa, the frenal attachments are good, there is adequate interarch space, except in the mandibular arch, the vestibule is less favorable. That means there is a resorption of the ridge somewhere, maybe in the anterior or the posterior region. This will help in determining the prognosis. Okay, so now I know that the prognosis with the maxillary denture would be very good, with the mandibular, or would be excellent, with the mandibular denture would maybe be very good, and the overall prognosis would be very good to excellent. This I can say on the basis of the diagnosis, and the diagnosis you can say on the basis of case history. Don't just write maxillary and mandibular completely edentulous arches, it doesn't help. And then we want some prognosis. Again, the prognosis would be based on whatever history we have taken. But these points are the most important when we are determining the prognosis. How is the tissue bearing area or the denture bearing area? That is one, keratinized, high well rounded, what is the arch form, what is the palatal vault, all those things. The tongue position. Then the floor of the mouth posture, that is the retromyloid space which we checked. The neuromuscular control of the patient, previous denture history, and the psychological evaluation, that is the kind of patient that he is. Everything can be wonderful, but if the patient is indifferent, we are not going to have good prognosis. Okay. And then again, when we are writing treatment plan, don't just write maxillary and mandibular complete denture. Or don't write all the steps also, including the laboratory steps. That also is not the correct way of writing treatment plan. You should write what step are you going to do and what material are you going to use, and please include only clinical steps. Okay. For example, primary impression will be made using impression compound. Final impression will be made using selective pressure technique. Jaw relation will be recorded using Niswonger's method for the vertical jaw relation and intraocclusal wax record method for centric jaw relation. And how are you going to recall the patient after the denture is given? How many times are you going to recall even if the patient does not have any problem? All these things you should be able to write in your treatment plan. Don't write cast will be poured in dental plaster, master cast will be poured in dental stone, the record basis will be made using self-cure acrylic resin. No, don't write that. That is not treatment plan. In case if you are doing something different from the regular conventional method, then you can write. We have already written, we are going to give a conventional complete denture. If you are going to do an injection molded complete denture, then you write that over there. Okay, but otherwise, don't unnecessarily write all the laboratory steps.